Welcome to Chronic Curiosity, where we have real conversations with real people, from everything to anything, in attempts to facilitate dialogue with our fellow humans, and hopefully your curiosity as well as ours. If you can withstand the show, we ask, most importantly, that you tell your friends and family, but also you can pick up some merch or just donate to the show at chronic-curiosity.com in USD or Bitcoin. If you feel so obliged, you can give us a good rating and follow on whatever podcast platform you so choose. But please feel free to reach out to us on the website or the socials, which can also be found on the website, chronic-curiosity.com. And here we go.
I'm sweating.
Ready.
You ready? I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've said almost every single time we've been doing this for what? This will be our going on 3 years, I think, doing this. And I still will get nervous every time. It's just like a physiological response at this point.
That's
it's
what
like,
I'm having.
Yeah. But there's no worries. Well, I really appreciate you coming, Emily and Ian.
Yeah.
And we've been, there's always like a trend that a lot of the people that we have on, we've had, guests that that I don't know. The first time I'm meeting them is right then and there. But a trend that we've had is, pulling people from the community and even the outside communities because of things they're doing and, showcasing, whether it's a business or, an event or, something just awesome that they're doing. But I know, we've been talking a while about doing this and you reached back out and, kind of said that you'd like to come on with Ian and talk about, ADD, ADHD, and kind of that world of what it is.
Yeah.
And I am, right off the rip, I'll say, like I've told you, I am completely ignorant of, what it is from the perspective of the people living it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fascinated to talk. And I guess I'll let you kind of take it from there. If you want to go wherever you want with it, start off with, who you are, and all the things.
Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can go. So I'm Ian. I'm the son. I'm 19 and I have ADHD or ADD more specifically. And I guess I would just say that we are also pretty ignorant in, what it means to have that and deal with it. And we're still learning every day. And she is especially learning and focusing on learning more about it.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's the starting point. I think the last time I talked to you was a couple years ago and you said, "Hey, do you want to talk?" And I was like, I looked back at my text and I said, "There's no way I can talk right now. Our life is so fucked up." And at that point we were really in the depths of ADD and kind of how it manifested in this essentially a blow up situation. And after that, I just kind of decided I'm going to learn absolutely everything there is to learn about this so that I can understand it, because I was so angry at Ian. But underneath all of that, I knew who he really was. And I knew that I needed to kind of figure out what was going on. So, in that process, I was also diagnosed with ADD, and both of us are also diagnosed with ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, which is kind of troubling and somewhat embarrassing. But so I just started to dig into, what is it? What does it mean? And how does it manifest? And what I found out was that was the root of everything else that was going on. And once we got a handle on the ADD, or we're still trying to get a handle on it, a lot of those other things went away.
Gotcha. So what kind of experience did you have? You said you had kind of a moment.
Do you want
So
to
before
the moment?
Well, I guess before then, like what experience or knowledge did you have of it
Well,
before? Because it seems like it was like a waking moment for you.
it was.
By the way.
So as a child, the joke was always that I had it, and my dad was very adamant that I didn't, and it wasn't real. But you look back over time, you're like, oh, but he did all of these things to help me manage it. And then when I went to college, I fell apart, and it was because the ADD was no longer being managed by someone else. So that's kind of the first step.
Can I stop you? What things did your dad help you do to
Um,
manage it in high school?
we had early morning farm chores, and he just managed all of my
Track
time. There was
practice.
track practice. I was a long distance runner. We physically worked hard all the time on the farm, and it was not optional. I mean, we were baling hay, and and he was just managing all of my time. I didn't, and my energy. So I went to school tired. um, and I worked on the weekends, and I think I had my first paying job the summer before my 7th grade year. I mean, I had a 5-hour a day job at the fairgrounds working with horses. So he was just managing energy. Um, and, you know, I didn't have the freedom to screw up. And then when I went to college, it all kind of came crashing down. But with Ian, he did really, really well in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. And I really had a handle on him. We have a farm. He was incredibly physical, which, was exhausting for me, but none of this started to really manifest or become a problem until he went to junior high. And then it just spiraled.
That's a
Like,
tough time frame for anybody.
it's a tough time. And that's the
Junior
thing. I
high
didn't know. Is it just junior high?
Right. Yeah.
Is it just, I didn't know. And, I kept trying to like justify, but, he went from, testing as high as possible on all testing, straight A's, to a 1.6 in a matter of like 8 months. And, at that point, that's when, we didn't know. So we started getting mad. You do all the things that every parent of ADHD does: try harder, sit still, stop being annoying, and he didn't do any of that. And so I got more mad and he got more defensive, and I moved schools. I thought that might help.
Did you notice a difference in that like 8-month period? Like, could you feel like a difference, like getting more difficult to, just be at school, or no?
I would just say that it was like I kind of just there was just a point where I was like, okay, this is dumb. I'm not gonna go to college. I don't want to even be here. So I'll just kind of, like spend my time doing something else at school. Like I would take my personal computer and like kind of do my own thing in the back of class and like just get enough stuff done so that I could graduate and pass and be done with high school. But
That sounds familiar.
yeah,
I can relate with that.
Yeah.
That I can relate with.
So
yeah.
I think it was just kind of a conscious choice to stop putting that effort in.
I think a good place to start is, first of all, there is some neuroscience behind ADHD.
Mm.
So in general, there's 3 chemicals in the brain: dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin.
Mm.
And in people that have ADHD, dopamine levels are low, and they're constantly searching for dopamine any way that they can get it.
Adrenaline.
Yeah.
is a good one.
Adrenaline. So he started doing the things that would give him that dopamine kick. There was a time he went into the school computer at Central, changed all of his grades to A's. I bought it like hook, line, and sinker.
I'm sorry, it's
And
not
he
funny.
thought it was so funny. And I thought he was a liar and a cheater. And, when you start being mad at your kid for being a liar and a cheater,
Right.
that's
It's a little
troubling.
different. Yeah.
I lost my license for like 6 months.
Yeah.
How old were you then?
Like 16.
But for him, it was like, this is fun and funny, and it's a dopamine kick, right? The other thing that happens with ADHD people is there's the understanding, or the perception of time is off. So they tend to live in a now or not now, those kind of 2 pods of time. So consequences are really irrelevant.
Right. Okay.
So he probably thought, this is funny now, not everyone's gonna be mad at me, I'm gonna get out of school, I'm gonna lose my license, I'll probably get kicked off the soccer team. Those things don't show up in that now
Right.
box of time. So, me being what I should have been angry about, was not that he was a liar and a cheater and a stealer and a whatever. It wasn't a moral shortcoming. We weren't managing the dopamine and we weren't managing the ADHD.
Yeah. So it seemed like he was just bored.
Yeah, he
And
was
you're just
bored.
looking for something to do. So that's another thing too, is where I look at everybody, as we've talked for hours to a bunch of different types of
Mhm.
people. And that's so fascinating to me as we see all these different types of people we meet on a daily basis that are so different from us.
Mhm.
And those are the ones we can see that are different than us.
Mhm.
And there's so many other people that
Mhm.
we're friends with, but until you really, get to know somebody and understand their differences and you go, wow, like I never knew that about you, like
Right.
years and years later. I don't know if you've ever heard of a DISC assessment.
Yeah.
A lot of times they do it for like workspaces and stuff,
Yeah.
because, how people like to handle, work and jobs and, tasks they're given, and they like to work on a team versus not. And, essentially there's like kind of 4 quadrants, and there's 4 groups of people that typically people fit into, but, that they give you kind of a dot in this 4-graph pie chart. And it's like, oh, this is kind of where you land on this, this DISC assessment.
Mhm.
And it's, people can be completely opposite, but they could also share like
Qualities.
and qualities with each other, and even then the dots go all over the place. So it's, I kind of always wondered, with ADHD and ADD and these types of things, like how much is it? It's not. I hate to look at like a like a condition or a disease or something like that. It's not like a disease. It's, or like maybe it's just we're recognizing that people are just so much different on all
Yeah.
the infinite spectrums that we have. So then, like, how do we fit that in? Like, is it more of
I think it's a brain type. It's a way of being in the world. The same as, living with diabetes. I mean, your experience in the world is different than mine because you're type 1, right? Ian's experience as an ADHD human is different than the kid sitting beside him in public school who isn't. So if we have the same expectations
Mhm.
and they have different capabilities, the system isn't created for both ends of the spectrum, right?
Right.
So if you're on one end of the spectrum, then all of a sudden you're bad, lazy, rude, disrespect, whatever. That's the way I think about it. Can you put yourself, what I want for Ian is to find his place in the world where the ADHD becomes a benefit instead of a hindrance. And that's what's important to me now is, sitting at a desk in public school is not it. Like, we know
I
that.
can imagine.
Yeah.
He has to move. And so, now that I understand ADHD, I can really manage my expectations. So if I had known, I would have never, ever, ever let him sit at Central Christian School for another day. It wasn't conducive to who he is. Using morality to curb behavior doesn't work for someone who has ADHD. It
Right.
just doesn't work.
I'm under the impression that teachers are often just like, your kid has ADHD, they need to go get tested. Did that ever get brought up, or is that not what actually
No,
happens?
which is kind
No.
of weird.
No, it's so weird to me. It blows my mind. The first time I should have known, he was in kindergarten. We were literally 2 months in, and his kindergarten teacher, who I loved and
Yeah,
he
she was
loved,
awesome.
she was awesome, called me and says, Ian's not eating lunch. He's crying in the lunch line. I don't know what's going on. It's been a couple of days. So he gets home and I like palpating his stomach and it's like a stone. So of course I think he has cancer and a tumor and all
Oh,
this.
right, naturally. That's obviously the first bet.
I take him to the doctor, they get him an x-ray. And what happened physically was that his body stopped working. So he had gone from 12, 15 hours of this hyperactive movement all day long. And I kid
We
you
live on a
not.
farm, so like
Oh, you're
outside all day
running.
when I was a kid,
Yeah.
in the woods all day from when I woke up to when it was dark. Like that's
Even
all
when he
we
was
did.
2, he would wake up, first word was outside. Okay, go. But then he went and he sat in a desk and his body stopped working. And at that point I didn't know, but Mike and I were like, okay, he's, we live a mile from the school. He's walking to school. He's riding his bike to school. And so I made him do push-ups before school. I made him kick his soccer ball before school so that I could get his body to start working.
Mm.
I should have known.
You know what's so crazy? Because like we're hunter and gatherers, right? So like your body was doing what it's supposed to do, and then
Mhm.
you just forced it to
To stop.
stop.
Yeah.
And like our bodies are just conditioned to that, like
Mhm.
society in general, because from the
Yeah.
time they're in kindergarten, that's what they do. And
Mhm.
Yep.
I mean, some of us have, an outlet that's physical to remain healthy, but like we're still not doing what
But it's
we
Right.
not.
have done forever.
It's not 12 hours a day. It's
Exactly.
like a
And like and that's
gym
what we
in the
used to
morning.
have to do.
Yeah.
You know, so an hour and a half in the gym once a day just does not
Doesn't cut
cut it.
Mm-mm.
And so it's just so weird because like I feel like your body's just doing what it should be doing. Like so
Yeah.
the rest of us just like cover it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the other thing that we know is that people with ADHD get an instinct to move more frequently than someone who doesn't have it. So the instinct to, play with your hair, tap your foot, whatever, that impulse from the brain to your physical body happens all the time. It never ever stops. So when you look at someone with ADHD and you're like, sit still, the assumption is that they can manage that impulse. But for someone with ADHD, they may have managed 100 of those signals and not responded to it, and then they do. So it's like you can't even see all of this chaos that's happening in their head. I want to leave this classroom. I'm going to get up. I'm going to get up. And they don't, and they don't. And then they're like, fuck it, I'm going to get up. And then they're in trouble.
Right.
But what you don't see is the immense effort it took to sit there for the first 20 minutes. So that's what I think about now when I think about Ian. He's working really hard and no one sees it. That's frustrating, you're like
Like mentally, you're trying to suppress your ADHD
who you
outbursts.
are.
Right.
So
And
if you were able to stand up, if you were able to tap, if you're in the back of the classroom, would you be able to concentrate to what they're saying instead of sitting there forcing yourself not to respond to what you want to respond to, whether it's tapping or standing up? Or is it still all kind of like you don't want to be there, so it's kind of fuzzy anyway?
I think it almost has to be like you're interested in the topic, and as soon as that happens, then you can actually kind of sit still. But if it's like something that your brain just like kind of like puts a little check mark next to like I'm not really that interested in it, you just kind of automatically like it's just gone. You can't really like focus or like tune in really deeply. But as soon as they're talking about a topic where you're like, oh, okay, I can think about that. That's interesting. Like there's some arguments I can have in my head with myself. Like then you really get into it, and there's no like, oh, I want to get up and leave. You're like really interested and really in depth to what's going
So you
on.
can micro focus on that
Yeah.
thing.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's been actually some talk about calling it attention direction disorder and deficit instead of, because it's not that they can't pay attention, but it's really hard to direct attention, especially if I'm asking him to pay attention to something. That's challenge. It's not that he can't pay attention, but if it's not interesting, it won't happen.
Right.
So they call it like a soda straw view. So Ian, it's like everything Ian does is, just this super pointed focus. Everything else doesn't.
So yeah, so that's what kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. It just seems like we're all just a little different in different categories,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And you have somebody like Elon Musk, who I think has Asperger's, and I've heard him say before, where like someone's like, oh, have you ever tried a deprivation tank? And he was like, no, thank you.
Right.
He's like, I can't shut my brain off.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine like what someone's brain is doing
Mm-hmm.
at the speeds that they do it at. So it's like, at the opposite end, like, hey, stop thinking about something.
Right.
What?
No.
Yeah.
I can't do that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So like, you mentioned, finding ways to utilize, how your body is and how your brain works. So, you said he's doing, you guys doing really well. Like, I guess
Mhm.
what is something that like you can try to kind of formulate, your life with and kind of structure around to help out and like, to kind of, be productive and.
I'll let you go.
I would say do your own thing. Like that's been the biggest help for me probably is just like kind of starting my own construction company. Like I have to force myself to do it. There's no one else that's gonna like kind of bail me out of it. Like I have to find work for the people who want to work for me and need paid. I have to get jobs done for customers like that. It's all on me to get done. And I feel like accountability is huge when you have ADHD because it's not like, oh, I don't want to finish this task, but sometimes knowing that, you could get bailed out by a coworker or someone else is going to finish it. If it's not interesting to you, it just might not get done.
Right. So you're running your own company now
Yeah,
at 19.
I do a construction small jobs company.
So how long you been doing that? That's awesome.
Just about a year.
So you started basically right when you turned 18. You're like, I'm gonna start a company.
Yeah, right when I graduated, me and a friend just like made some business cards. Like
All of a sudden it's
tried to
real.
get some jobs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of a better thing for an 18 or 19-year-old to do, even if it's something that eventually you were like, I don't want to necessarily run my own business. You
Yeah.
find something else that you really kind of fit into. Like, you're getting more of an education, in my opinion. You're getting more of an education in these next years than you ever would have sitting in high school.
Yeah,
Because, like the practical world experience, all those things. How did you come to the decision of just, hey, let's start a company? How did that happen?
Well, it was a pretty simple path to get to the construction company. I wanted money, and I kind of looked at the skills that I had at the moment, which was construction and farming, because the rest of my family has employed me for cheap labor for their companies before. So
Better than free
Yeah.
labor,
Yeah.
there, right?
So yeah, I guess we just tried to focus on how we could monetize our skills, basically.
What gave you the insight? Because I can tell you at 18, I was not necessary. I mean, I've worked a full-time job and since I was young, but I never thought when I was 17, 18, starting a business today and doing it. Like, so what kind of gave you that opening in your mind or that insight to be able to kind of see that?
I think it was more so like frustration with working for somebody else and like not enjoying that and really being like yeah, I guess it's just like ADHD. I didn't like, working for someone else. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to be responsible, accountable for myself, and
You just did it.
yeah, so I did it.
Curiously, that's one of the really wonderful things about ADHD. When you say they don't consider consequences, it doesn't occur to Ian, what if this business doesn't work? What if I don't get any jobs? What if I don't know what I'm doing? And in some ways he doesn't.
Yeah,
He's
I
taking
don't know what
jobs,
I'm
he
doing.
doesn't know what he's doing, but he learns so quickly because he learns in a really tactile way. So being there and be like, okay, I need to put in this tile. He will absolutely figure it out. He doesn't get stuck. So that's when ADHD serves him really, really well. He's not intimidated by having the skills that he needs or not. So when I see that stuff happen, I'm like, okay, he's in the right place.
Right.
So if I had, and even Mike and I decided I really, really wanted him to go to college because I feel like he's so bright. And if he could focus on something that he really loved, that he would be successful. And he, from age 10, was like, there's no chance. So Mike and I kind of decided, at that point, he was still pretty angry. We were angry with him. He was angry with us.
Yeah.
When we decided, we're like, you have to go to college or you have to go. You have to move out. And when he moved out, things started clicking into place immediately. And I think it's that he was, I wasn't telling him to do something. Mike wasn't telling him to do something. School wasn't telling him to do something. All of a sudden, we were like, you're on your own, all of it. We're not bailing you out of anything. We're not paying your rent. We're not. And all of a sudden, he was like
When it has
doing
to
the
happen.
things.
Yeah, he had a task that he was willing to achieve at that point, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you look at I think the vast majority of successful people in any realm, it's the people that are willing to take chances, right? Like I've heard time and time again for business owners and people that go out there and, even sports, you see those guys doing double backflips on snowmobiles and stuff like that. It's like, if you're not willing to take the chance, well, then you're never going to succeed.
Right.
You're never going to have anything. So if you sit all day long thinking about, if I fail,
Yeah.
well, the second you think about, well, if I fail, then you're probably going to, because that's what you're thinking about. So I think, these successful people just put their mind to it, and you have the energy for it. And if you're, able to go out on that limb and
you have no risk assessment category in your brain, you don't get tripped up in the things most people get tripped up by? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I don't have the tools I need? What if I actually don't know what if I get fired? Those things don't occur to you. They really don't occur to you. And it kind of gives you a bit of freedom to take the risk
Mhm.
because you don't consider consequences.
Ian, when did you actually get the diagnosis, and when did you get the diagnosis?
In the
I don't-
emergency room, I think. Maybe.
You got yours in the emergency room?
No, I
or-
got yours when we were in Cleveland at Akron Children's,
Oh,
actually.
yeah.
No,
So, like,
after that.
speak
So it
to
would have been like
whatever of
sophomore
that.
year.
Okay.
So
And you were never homeschooled, right?
no, other than like COVID, which
Oh,
'Cause we
were
are-
at home
'cause-
for
okay.
a year.
Oh, they did, and nobody did anything.
Yeah,
with
we didn't
COVID,
do
I feel
anything,
like.
so-
He did get kicked out of one school, essentially because of ADHD, I would say. Because of
because of bad choices. Yeah.
but the bad choices were, I thought they were bad choices because he was a bad person. I hate saying that out loud, but in the moment, I thought, I think about some of the things I said to him now, your father and I gave you everything, those dumb things you say as a parent. Why are you doing this really, really stupid stuff? So I thought the bad choices were because he was a bad person, which is horrible. So if anyone ever says that to their child, what you have to do is, why are the bad choices happening? They're not a bad person, right? I raised this kid. I know he's not a bad person. But in the moment when things got so bad, that's the question I was asking myself. Is this just
So-
a bad person?
I think that was helpful for her when we found out I had ADHD. She was like, "Oh, well, maybe it is something else," like, but I also think that if we would have been told in like 3rd grade, this kid has ADHD, we would have, they would have acted differently. They might have been more lenient, which I don't think would have been beneficial, actually.
Mm.
I think that them being tough and, keeping me accountable, even though I was struggling with ADHD, was really important to being able to like suppress it on my own when I need to. And I feel like, it's not like a crutch. It's not something that you should change how you interact with your life. At least that's how I feel. So I think that if we would have, known from since I was little and made changes, that we would be in a completely different place. And I don't know, where that would be, but
I do almost feel like we had to go through all of that to get here.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there would be a point of looking from the outside. Okay, we've been diagnosed with ADHD, kind of know this is a thing, but then I would feel like there's a point that it seems like that's happened somewhat recently that you've both kind of realized, okay, we knew this thing existed, but now, okay, this is kind of really what it is. And how did you get there? How long did it? Because I know you said you're still learning every day,
mm-hmm.
but it feels like there was kind of a moment that, okay, now we understand how to work this into our lives, I guess, and how to do that.
I don't know what you want me to say, but
You
or
can
not
say whatever. I
So
promise.
at one point, Ian was. Can I?
Yeah, I'm open to talk about it.
Things had been pretty bad. He was sneaking out at night. He was, not following the rules. That simple. Doesn't matter what the rules were. He wasn't following them. We get a call from the police. We have your son. There was drugs. There were guns. All of it. Like as bad as you can imagine. The phone call that you get
As a parent.
as a parent. I have 3 other kids at the dinner table at the time. We leave, and there's been an exchange where, I think they were trying to sell weed. I don't know if it was actually something else. They were trying to sell weed to another kid who brought a gun. Ian, the gun was at another kid's head at one point, I think. I don't really know. Doesn't matter. There was a
We
fight.
don't have to go into details of the crime.
Yeah, Ian, there was a physical fight. The police called us. Ian, at that point, was also thriving as a soccer player at a Christian school. And another one of the major mistakes I made, used to threaten Ian that I would take soccer away if he didn't behave. So that night I said, I'm calling your coach. And that's when things really blew up.
Mm-hmm.
He basically ran away. We tried to get him back. We called the police. He ended up in the emergency room after what was labeled as a severe depressive episode. And again, details won't be helpful. Ended up in the emergency room, got taken to Cleveland to a facility where he was essentially being watched for a few days. And in that time, the superintendent of Central Christian called us and said he can't come back to school. So in that moment, we were really
Right
out
before the district final game, by the way.
right before the district final game, which he now would not be able to play.
So if none of this happened at school, though, is it just
Doesn't.
just
I
because
tried
of
to.
how
private school.
because it's a private Christian school, it just optics.
Pretty
Okay.
much.
So we were out of options at that point. And at that point, Mike and I were so angry, right? And I shouldn't have been. I should have been so sad. And I could kick myself in the head 1,000 times over and over and this punch myself again and again. Doesn't matter now. But I was so angry. Ian was so angry. My guess now is he felt so misunderstood and unseen. And he was clearly like needing something. None of us were providing. School wasn't. We weren't. Religion wasn't. Nothing was providing that. And he essentially just fell apart.
Yeah.
And they hooked us up with a counselor at Akron Children's Hospital, a specialist with ADHD. And I remember the first time, at this point, Ian's not speaking to us. He's not looking at us. There's lots of screaming matches between us and him. And, it's terrible. Absolutely 100% terrible.
Because I was really upset about the soccer. Like, I was really, really
The one thing he
heartbroken.
probably liked at the time.
Yeah, that I couldn't play in that game specifically. And
which
for
I
the rest of
essentially
the
took
year.
away. I started that ball rolling by saying, I'm calling your coach. So everything else that happened that night was a result of that comment that I made. The thing is, I never called the coach. I was threatening him, which you're not supposed to do as a parent. I thought I could get him to behave if I said that.
And we also don't know how they found out about a police matter that had nothing to do with them, that was
Outside.
like 20 miles away from the school.
Who knows, though? People
Yeah.
talk.
And at that point, actually, when the school called us, I said to Mike, I was devastated. And Mike's like, we just learned everything we need to know about that school. He's not going back there.
Right.
I wanted him to go back there. I wanted him to play soccer. I really thought that he and this coach had something that was helping. It was the only thing I thought at the time was helping. And I didn't want to let that go, even though I was the one that threatened.
And we
Threatened
did.
with it.
Like, the soccer coach at Central is amazing. I just want to say
Yeah,
that.
and they
He's
had a
an
great
awesome guy.
relationship. So I should not have used that as a threat. I regret that. But anyway, they hooked us up with this wonderful doctor at Akron Children's. And the first meeting we had as a family, Ian's not speaking to us. We're not speaking to Ian. He's not looking at us. Everyone's so angry. And I was kind of saying to the doctor, well, he's doing this and he did this. And the doctors said to me, he's like, Emily, if we manage the ADHD, all of that goes away. Like, you're focusing on the wrong things. You can be mad at him for, I don't want to throw Ian under the bus, but all of these terrible things that he had done. But if we get a handle on this, that all stops. That's what you're not seeing.
Trying to mitigate the symptoms, not
Yeah.
the
And
actual
was that
issue.
the first time that you had heard like you might have ADHD? Like
That was that all happened in a week or
in
so.
that time
Yeah.
frame?
Yeah. But really, we got there because he had a major depressive episode, and
Was that a shock when they were like, we think the underlying issue is ADHD? To either
shouldn't have
of you?
been.
I don't think
What
it
about
was.
to Mike? Like, was he?
I can't tell.
Mike, first of all, Mike and Ian are so close now because
Yeah.
because now that we understand ADHD, Mike will say to me all the time, I'm going to ask Ian because he thinks about it differently than I do. So it used to be, Mike is so regimented, reliable, precise, predictable, and Ian is the opposite of all that.
As are you. Just
As am
from knowing
I.
you
Yeah.
personally, right? Like,
She's the
I feel
opposite
like
as
you
well.
guys are pretty opposite. Okay.
Right. So that was a source of conflict early on because Mike was like, you need to be, and he still does that to me. He's like, this is the right way to wash the dishes. This is the right way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Everything we do, Mike does it in a reliable, his car always has gas. Mine never has gas. So those kinds of things are funny unless,
Right.
They're
they
causing
get,
big problems.
they're causing big problems.
Right.
So for Mike, it was so difficult because that stuff comes so naturally to him. And he was just like, what are you doing? Like, get up, put your clothes on, go to school, sit there in the chair, do what they say, come home, you go to soccer practice, shut your mouth. And Ian didn't actually have the capacity to do those things, which
Especially
we didn't
not as a kid.
understand.
I mean, yeah, I feel like it's much worse when you're 9 and
Well, I can
12.
imagine. Well, because as you get older, you living
Right.
through all these experiences,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
times even if you don't like the thing and you don't like what it is, you can kind of look at it and go, okay, I've been through this before.
Yeah.
Even though I don't want to make this
Yeah.
decision, let's take a different route because you have that experience. But
Right.
being able to understand that and having that self-awareness, I guess maybe that's the point when you become kind of self-aware of, all right,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily operate the same as many people around me. And, how has that affected, you've talked about family relationships, but how has that, has it changed your, friendships and different relationships with other people,
Mhm.
being able to recognize that?
I certainly changed my relationship with Ian, and even with Mike, I think.
I don't think that it changed any of my friendships, so to say. I would say that most of them probably already assumed like there's something wrong, but we don't know what it is.
And I don't think there's something wrong. I think
Right,
it's
yeah.
just it's
Yeah, it's just different.
different. And some of the really common characteristics are you interrupt all the time, you can't follow a train of thought, you have this impulse to say something that's kind of rude, you think it's kind of funny, and most people have like brakes on their car and they're like, probably shouldn't say that. And for ADHD people, oftentimes there's just no brakes. So you do things that are really annoying.
The one I do that's like frustrating for myself is like I'll finish people's sentences before they get their whole sentence out and then answer the question for them. And
Yeah.
it's like I'm sorry, it was just taking too long. Like I already had your question finished
Don't
in
you
my
look
head
at me.
and my answer. So, I just that's something I have to like focus on not doing.
I can understand. And at the same aspect, you look at the other end of the spectrum, there's people out there that don't, even go all the way to, they're not even caring what the other person's saying
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
thinking of or anything like that. So they're
Yeah.
completely checked out and they don't respond at all.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, which is quote unquote worse? Like, I don't know. We need, all of these things kind of pieced together for
Yeah.
everybody to kind of
Right.
harmoniously
wide
work.
world,
Yeah,
right?
not if it,
Yeah.
it might take you a little while, but you realize not everyone's the same. Not
Yeah.
everyone operates the same. I said it plenty of times. The longer Cassie and I are together, the more we recognize our differences, and the
Right.
more like it's not difficult because we've worked together
Right.
so long.
Mhm.
But it's the more you spend time with somebody and understand them, it's like, oh, like
Right.
you're a lot different than I thought
Yeah.
you were. And it's
Or-
not a bad thing.
No.
It's just like, all right, how do we make this work? Because we recognize those
And
things.
or even the concept, it sounds so basic, but that one event happened and two people had an incredibly different experience in the same event. And I think that, especially for, Mike and I, and then Mike and Ian, just the experience of a singular event can be so drastically different. And having some empathy for people who do react or see the world differently is hugely helpful. The problem is that the school system now does not celebrate that kind of being in the world. That's just a fact. It
Right.
doesn't, it's difficult if you have Ian in your classroom. I get that. It's a pain in the ass. He's also at my kitchen table, equally a pain in the ass, right? But now, and I don't use it as an excuse. I try really hard not to use it as a crutch, but I can understand it at least.
Right.
So sitting at a 3-hour dinner is hard for Ian. Okay, that's
So when you were diagnosed, how old were you?
I would have been like 15, 16.
So did they give you options like, here are ways that we can treat this, or was it just like, here's medication, or were there other options that were presented, or?
medication was first. And at that point,
Medication therapy.
we were in deep shit. So
Yeah.
he was like, we need medication to at least take the edge off. We did lots of therapy, and Ian smoked weed.
Which probably didn't help with the medication. at
Which
the
didn't
time.
help with
So
medication.
mixing the two. Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that being an issue. Yeah.
But what we know about weed, and I'm not condoning it,
I mean, you can.
If
You
you'd like
totally
to.
can. I mean, everyone has to make their own choice. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
I think that was a big problem with school, right? You don't smoke weed if you're in school. You're not allowed. That's fact. Doesn't matter. What we know about weed is it does heighten your dopamine level. The other thing that happens is it also heightens your serotonin level. So you get the dopamine kick that you're after. And since the serotonin is high, you feel a sense of calm. So you're getting the things that you need. Now, over time, smoking a ton of weed, you can't remember what you're focusing on.
You can't get too
But-
high, right?
Right.
That doesn't do you any
But-
good.
The fact that people that have ADHD can be drawn to things like cocaine, weed, sugar, caffeine makes sense because it processes differently in your brain. You feel differently.
When you say it processes differently in your brain, you mean when you get that high? Like when you actually have the substance?
The neurochemistry is different.
Okay.
So sugar reacts differently. That's why sometimes young kids with ADHD will crave like Mountain Dew. They actually feel a sense of calm.
Yeah, I was gonna say the easiest one is like coffee has the reverse effect that it has for most people on people with ADHD. It's
Right.
actually like I could drink coffee before I go to sleep essentially, and it's not really gonna keep me up. It's not gonna stimulate my brain as much as it would for
Right.
someone
Well,
without
It's
it.
crazy.
I've had friends before that had taken like Ritalin, and
Yeah.
then of course that gets circulated in high school areas,
Right.
and it's like it has the exact opposite because
Right.
it makes sense
Right.
to me now. Yeah,
And
and-
also Adderall does that as well.
Yeah.
If you take Adderall and you don't have ADHD, it's like a rush. It's like a stimulant. It's like cocaine.
That's so
almost.
crazy because I always wondered, like, why are college kids
Right.
taking Adderall to stay up to study for their exams? Like, I thought that was supposed to, like,
Yeah,
bring
it's a
you
huge
down.
stimulant.
I
Yeah.
never understood that. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's
Essentially,
nuts.
it's like a teeny tiny dose of meth, which they like to say it's not, but I mean,
It is.
it
Yeah,
is.
That's
all
why
of
it's
those
controlled
compounds
substance.
are-
Yeah, it's
right, or-
it's crazy.
and but
So-
even you talked about weed, like that can be different for a lot of people. A lot of people
Right.
doesn't-
Experience it differently.
Yeah, they experience it wildly
Mhm.
differently, and it's like
Mhm.
because especially some of those people I've heard like, everyone's like, oh, weed's great. It's compared to all these other drugs.
Mhm.
Like if you're gonna do like it's
Right.
natural, it's this that whatever, and then some people just don't have a good experience with
Right.
it at all. It's like it makes you realize that we are all chemically a
Right.
little
Very
different.
different. You know, processing things
Like,
differently.
we all have the same pieces and parts, but they work differently together once we really realize that. And that's just fascinating.
It's mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Because then you understand why someone has an instinct for something.
Mhm.
The problem is, of course, if you're in the midst of a severe depressive episode, say, I'm just extrapolating here, and then that urge, is so prevalent that you start doing cocaine, like that's bad. That's why we need to manage ADHD, like because that instinct is there and it's strong, and that's when it gets dangerous. And in my mind, that's when ADHD, knowing that you have it is helpful because you know that that's a tendency or the probability is higher.
I wish Tony was here. Is there a correlation between ADHD, like what that brain and the chemicals look like, compared to like addicts, regardless of what the addiction is? Is
I
it
mean,
similar?
You should hear the stats about ADHD. People are, I think it's 43% more likely to be in a car accident. Ian no longer has his license. He's been in a car accident. He's wrecked I don't know how many cars. The impulse to drive fast, which calms your brain down, is so prevalent you don't even know you're doing it. The instinct to be the probability of you becoming an addict to any number of things, sex, drugs, alcohol, weed, I mean, whatever, is high because what you're trying to do is manage this madness in your mind. It's like being on a hamster wheel all the time. It's exhausting and no one sees it. You look like a normal person sitting there. So yes, it's terrifying, really. When you think, I have a kid with ADHD, oh, they're fine in 3rd grade, you ignore it. They're fine in 7th grade, you ignore it. All of a sudden, you send them to college and they're in deep, deep shit because you haven't put the tools in place to manage it. That's why it's important. And that's why it's real, right? We have stats that show us that being this way in the world creates a specific set of problems. Being your way in the world creates a specific set of problems. Your way in the world, it's not that, everyone has that, right? Everyone has tendencies, but the tendencies with ADHD are terrifying, I think.
So I guess maybe that's another part of it I'm thinking about too is you talk about managing it a lot.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that it's maybe using a broad brush, that it's maybe not necessarily so much as managing it, but managing yourself in the way society is constructed.
Need you
You know,
to.
and
Yeah.
so like how much of that is just, hey, society is built this way because, you know, we need people. I'm kind of a believer in the schools are kind of like just preparing people to go to work in a factory. You know, where that's kind of not the world. Like we're turning into a different world.
Yeah.
Then, you know, this isn't the Industrial Revolution anymore.
Right.
You know, like we don't need people in
Mhm.
factories all the time. We have robots for that now. So like how much do you think of that is just the way society is constructed? It's just being not necessarily being able to fit in that box perfectly. So it's not really managing a problem. It's just,
Yeah.
you know,
Creating
A large part of it is because, like, for example, when we're in Costa Rica and I don't wear shoes for 2 weeks and I don't wear a t-shirt for 2 weeks and we surf every day, my ADHD is much less, but it's still there. Like when I'm out on the water, I'm still like racing. It's not like it goes away, but it comes up in different ways. And when you're not in like Costa Rica is my favorite place because it's like their society is not like ours. It's very much like chill, like relax, enjoy your life, live your life. Like the world is beautiful, enjoy it. And when you kind of like go through every day with that mindset, it changes a lot. And instead of, I feel like where we are in our Western world is like, you know, we have to go to work, we have to accomplish things every day, we have to, you know, make money, we have to prove ourselves, we have to validate ourselves, we have to, you know, like social media, like all of those things, they just don't exist there. So your ADHD is a lot more like one-on-one and like mental and like just kind of in your brain thinking. It's not.
It doesn't affect so much around you like
Yeah.
it does here.
Yeah.
He's a different person. I remember, I think when Mike was opening, I don't know what restaurant he was opening, but I took all 4 kids to Virginia Beach. I think Ian was probably 7 or 8. I don't remember. And there were these kids surfing. And Ian's like, Mom, I want to surf. I want to surf. I want to surf. So finally I rented him a surfboard. And literally for the next 8 hours, I didn't see the child. And I remember I called Mike that night and I was crying. And I was like, Mike, you wouldn't believe it. Like, none of the stuff that Ian does that makes my life so difficult happened. Nothing. He ate, he slept, he was tired, he was polite, he wasn't, you know, poking Vincey, like prodding Mia. You know, he wasn't after the dopamine all day long because it was there. So he was
how to surf.
hyper focused.
That's awesome.
He was in the water. There was lots of, you know, tactile sensation. There's all of these things were happening. And the ADHD, I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I was literally in tears. I was like, Mike, you have to see this. You have to see this child. And I remember we had no money at the time and I bought a surfboard and I brought it, I strapped it to my car and I brought it home. And Mike was like, you know, what are you doing? And it was such a moment for me because it was like, he was fine. Like all of the trouble just 100% disappeared.
It's like who he is at his baseline.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like I don't even know you, Ian. Like I did yoga teacher training with your mom. Like I don't know you that well. But I saw the multiple videos of you teaching the little kid to surf.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, I don't care. That's Ian's baseline. Like
Right.
he can do fucked up shit like we all do, but like that's who he is.
Right.
Like, and I'm sure at that point, like you guys had been there for, I don't know, a week or so, 2
Yeah.
weeks. And you obviously are on like a good path, but like it's just,
Right.
I don't know. I just have like such a, I don't know. Fred did a lot of fucked up shit when he was.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like, I just have this like weak spot for people that like figure it out and,
Yeah.
you know, have that self-appraisal. Like you guys have to be able to look, everybody does. They have to be able to look in and figure out like, how am I going to make it work?
Mhm.
And that's different for everybody. And
Right.
a lot of people don't figure it out at 19. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of other world stuff, right? Because it's not like you only have ADHD. You also
Right.
have all the other shit
Right.
in the world that everybody has to deal with.
Yeah, wait till your 20s.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of that. But it's just,
That's when I got in trouble. When I stopped seeing that and I started to believe what everyone else was telling me, what the school was telling me, what his teachers were telling me, when I started to think that maybe they were right and I was wrong, is when I got in trouble. Because that's when I kind of threw Ian under the bus. And that was my mistake. And that's every mother's mistake that does that. I mean, you have to know deep down who your kid is. And if they're not in the right place, it's your job to put them there. I should have packed him up and taken him to Costa Rica and said, we're going to school here. Or I should have done, and I tried to send him to Central. I tried to, at one point it was so bad, Mike and I talked about, and I'm embarrassed to say this, Mike, I don't even know if he would want me to. We called one of those places where they come and get your kid in the night and they put him in the woods for 2 weeks. That's how desperate we were. And
he probably would have been like, don't make me go home.
But I didn't know what else to do. And when that conversation got really real, like we called the place, I remember saying to Mike, I'm not going to let someone else do this for us. If that's what needs to be done, I'm doing it. And I immediately bought tickets, and Ian and I flew out to Colorado, and we just started walking. And we walked and we hiked.
It was a fun trip.
It was a fun trip. But I should have put him in the right place. I had him in the wrong place, and I was mad at him for not doing well in the wrong place. But all I can say is I didn't know.
I think we should also say that for the 3 days that we were just walking through the Coloradian woods, that we didn't have much ADHD.
It was fine. Great. We were both great.
And does yours manifest differently, or is it pretty? Because I know that females and males, women get diagnosed much later in life, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't have the
Often.
same
We're not as annoying.
side
No.
effects.
We're not-
Yeah, like can you guys contain it a little bit more? But does it
Um,
manifest differently?
I think it's harder to identify the symptoms in women.
Also, I get pulled over by speeding. I don't get a ticket often. Ian gets pulled over for speeding. He gets 4 tickets in 1 year. He ends up where he ended up. So I think it's just different. I think women are treated differently, not better or worse. And, some ways better, some ways worse. For me, I mean, I've never had a job. Not one day in my life have I gone to work at one time, come home at another time, and gotten paid. I have always felt insecure about that. My sisters are both, they both have 2 master's degrees. They've thrived in school. And I have always felt like, why the fuck can't I have a job? Now I know that I can't. Like, that's absolutely, it's really unlikely that I would ever do well. So now at 51, today is my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Now at 51, I'm okay with it. I think, thank goodness I didn't try to force myself to do that.
But it's
Oh,
not like
you've
you
been
don't work.
miserable.
Like you
Oh, I work
are
hard.
busy. You have
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have careers.
But
Like
I
you
can't-
are an
Not the 9 to 5
entrepreneur.
or
No,
whatever.
Yeah, you just don't have a job for somebody else.
Yes.
Well, it seems like I've take a phrase that I've learned from Cassie's, but like filling your cup.
Right.
And if
right.
you have an empty
Mhm.
cup that you don't know is empty because you've never realized it,
Yeah.
that's what it kind of seems like. That's, what it is, going surfing or,
Mhm.
not being in a 9 to 5, doing your own thing. That's, whatever you're finding that's filling your cup to make you feel normal.
Right.
It's probably a good thing you never tried to work because
Right. I don't think I could have.
yeah, I'm not like, I can force myself to sit still, but sitting at a desk,
Mhm.
working at a computer for a company is
Yeah.
pretty rough for people that don't have ADHD or
Right.
or
Anyway,
even on the
it's rough.
other end, it's like what am
Right.
I doing here?
Yeah.
Like, so I probably dodged a big bullet
But I can,
there.
now I can manage if Ian says to me, I want to do X, I can say, okay, maybe it might not be right for the majority of people in the world, but if, it's just seeing it's a different way of being. And I have learned for me that it means I'm probably not ever going to have a job. I'm not going to get a master's degree. And I've always felt like I should, because that's what you do if you're a
Yeah.
female in my family. I'm not going to have good grades ever. Like, it's just not. I mean, Ian ended, what was your high school end of 2.1?
No, it was 1.6.
1.6?
Graduated with 1.6.
But then he's when he does state testing, he's so proficient. So I don't let myself or him now be measured by that.
Right.
I know how bright he is. I remember one teacher at Central, her name was Elaine, and we went in, that's when Ian's grades went from A's to F's instantly. And she's like, oh, I'm not worried about the content. He gets it. Like, I'm not worried at all. You have a really bright kid here. And I'm grateful now that she said that to me, because that phrase was then in my mind.
Right.
This grade is not a measure of his competency. It's a measure of his behavior and his attention. It's a
Effort
measure of
to-
different things. I thought it was a measure of how bright he was. And she taught me that it wasn't.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the measurements that we see in society today, whether it be grades or, what kind of job you have or this, that, whatever, it's not a measure of the person you are.
Right.
It's just
a measure of the measure.
Yeah, it's a measurement. It's some kind of quantifying factor, and it might be bullshit.
Right.
That's just staged up for whatever.
Yeah.
I am 100% complete bullshit. I totally agree. And it's so hard because it's like I think the tables are turning on that a little bit. It seems like there's more of the, hey, it's okay not to go to college. Because I was in a similar boat. I knew by the time I was a sophomore, like, this ain't gonna work. I'm not going to college. And I went from good grades to, I was like, well, what do grades matter, right? There's no, as long as I graduate, like, who cares? And I think there's it's changing. It seems like there's and maybe not as much as we would like it to be, but there's more conversations people are having and discussing these things and realizing that, it's maybe not necessarily always, hey, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Like, no, wait a minute. Like, unless like, physically it's much easier to see like what's wrong, quote unquote, or not.
Right.
But I have a hard time when, there's obviously people out there that need some serious, mental help because, whatever it may be. But a lot of these things get kind of stigmatized, I feel like ADHD and Asperger's and, the list goes on and on and on of, well, maybe you're just a little different than the models we've had in the past. And, how long have we been doing this whole like medical and mental health thing? What, 30 years, maybe 40 years? So like, we haven't even like built reliable models to like put people up against to see how much of an outlier you are that you might need some, different help.
And really, I don't think, ADHD is that much of an outlier. It just doesn't work in certain situations.
Within the structure.
But we also don't have a reference point.
Right.
We don't know what it is to not have ADHD or, not have those impulses.
Yeah.
So.
But I think people like, maybe you're definitely right there. Because I obviously don't know, but like, I think, the way you're describing your experiences and, how you think, I can relate to portions of that. And like, the world needs people that are in that spectrum of whatever you want to call it. We wouldn't have artists, making beautiful clay pieces. We wouldn't have musicians. We wouldn't have people that are saying, I can't go work for somebody. I'm going to go start my own company. Like, those are the people that, build the foundation of our society at the core of it, so in musicians and, all the different things that people are like, no, I'm going to be a little different than the most.
There's a great book I recommend to everyone. It's called Driven to Distraction, and it's by Edward Hallowell and John Rady, who actually, he does a lot of research on exercise and ADHD. But one of the things that we need to start doing is celebrating ADHD, because these tend to be with the people who are, artists, musicians, athletes, creators, inventors. All of this stuff often happens if you imagine someone with an ADHD brain and you're on train tracks, right? And you're thinking about a problem. People without ADHD will stay on the linear track. People with ADHD have all of these side tracks, and they take every single one. It's like they can't stop turning off and, okay, if this can happen, then can this happen, and then can this happen? And that type of creative thinking has a place. It just doesn't happen when you're talking about religion in a Christian school. It doesn't work when you're, so.
Not much does.
But there's something to celebrate about being able to have a brain that works that way. The problem is when that instinct for thinking like that is suppressed, the people that have it and also have no impulse control, which is what Ian is really fighting against, impulse control, they do something to create the kind of the uptake. I remember
out of anger. Like,
usually they're mad by that point.
Out of anger that you couldn't in the first place, I guess.
I remember the school calls me, Emily. I mean, the school called me every day for years. Every day. Emily, are you aunt? Yes. What now? I think he was a sophomore or a junior in high school. Principal calls. Ian was sitting in the classroom. He threw a water bottle out the window. I'm like, not surprised.
Okay.
What do you want me to do? But what physically happens is he's sitting there.
Yeah. Why'd you have the window open? They're just asking for me to throw something out of it.
What I wanted to say is, here he is. He's sitting in classroom. He's been sitting there for 20 minutes. He's bored as hell, talking about the same thing. And he sees this water bottle. And my guess is the impulse, there's an open window. The impulse to throw it out happens 50 times.
Yeah, it was there for the whole 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's like,
And then add to that, you don't have the brakes on your Porsche brain, right? So you're 100 miles an hour. You've suppressed the urge 100 times. There's no brakes, and you eventually do it. Instantly, you get the dopamine. Instantly, you've created what you're craving.
right.
So would Adderall put the brakes on that? Probably. He doesn't like it, so he's taking it. So what I can't say is, oh, not surprised. Don't call me next time. But it is a problem at school.
Right.
But I also can clearly remember being in a soccer game, Ian, and it, the game getting so, close or important, or, this really high intensity moment. And Mike would turn to me and he would be like, Ian just got interested. So it's when things are like that, the most chaotic, the most stressful, Ian drops into this like flow state, and he's just chill. There's no anxiety, there's no stress, there's no worry. His confidence he turns into like this different person. But I can't create that all the time.
Right.
It almost has to be in those moments of super high intensity that I'm like, oh, this is great. It's going to last like 5 minutes maybe. But that's where these people tend to thrive.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you're talking about being angry, it's like, all I could think of was the thought popped in my head. I had no idea why. But it's like making Jimi Hendrix be an accountant.
Right.
Like, that's not going to work.
No,
like, you know what I mean? Like, so I guess, you said in those moments is where you feel the best. How do you mitigate, those moments, and how do you, maybe not those moments, but the rest of all the other things? Like, what are some tools and, things that you've done to kind of help you get by when you're around normal people that are boring as hell? Because I can feel that pain. So how do you
I think I try and force myself to get to the flow state as much as I can. Like throughout my week, I would say you just like going to the gym is really helpful. I can put on my headphones, like over the ear headphones, and I can completely zone out, and I can lift, and I can feel my muscles operating, and I'm in a flow state. And then for the rest of the day, I'll have like a runner's high, almost or like we'll go on long runs, and it's like I can get into a flow state, and after that, for the rest of the day, I'm kind of calmed down. I think that is really helpful, like forcing yourself to go to that place either early in the morning or like at the end of the day, ideally early in the morning, so you can, interact the rest of your day without this like urge to like do something, is really helpful.
Do you feel satisfied after you complete the urge, or is it just kind of like,
For sure. After you run 2 miles, I'll be like a serious runner's high for like 45 minutes.
So if you give into like an impulse, like throwing the water bottle out the window, do you feel like a sense of satisfaction?
Yeah, for sure.
You do. Okay. So like it feels good.
Yeah.
It's not
does
like
feel good to act
I really
on
wanted to do that,
impulses.
and then I did, and then it didn't like bring me anything. Like it feels good.
No, it was funny for me to throw the water bottle out the window.
And then all of the repercussions of that, them calling me being mad, like all of that is fun.
Yeah, it's also funny because everyone's getting bent out of shape about a water bottle. It's like
And it does. That's how chemicals work in the brain. It's not like an on and off switch, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that for everyone, if if your dopamine or adrenaline or any of these feel good chemicals go up, it doesn't stop the minute you stop whatever is creating that. So there is some after effects, and also the more intense, usually the longer it lasts for him.
Yeah.
This might be too personal. You don't have to answer. Is your father still alive, Emily?
Yeah.
So we were talking about celebrating versus suppressing. So what are his thoughts now that Ian's been diagnosed, that, you've constructed your life around this energy and this personality after he was like,
I will
didn't
say
think it was a thing?
When things were at the worst, like I've never felt excommunicated the way that I did when all of this happened. Like people disappeared. 100% disappeared.
It was a pretty public thing too. We should,
It was so public.
like everybody knew about it and had
People
an
wouldn't
opinion about it.
look at me. Mike and I were terrible parents. Ian was a terrible person. All of these people I had sat at soccer games with for 2 years and loved Ian, like wouldn't look at me, wouldn't answer emails. It was like, I think it's being called ghosted now.
Yeah, canceled.
yeah.
It was like who
Canceled.
got
Canceled.
canceled.
Yeah.
And that to me was, I care what people think about me. I shouldn't. I know I shouldn't. People say it all the time, but I do. And I will say that my father was the very first person to just say, I'm in it. Like, love the kid. I love you. You're doing a great job. Like, let's figure this out. So I don't know that he actually believes that ADHD is real. And he definitely does not believe in using any medication ever.
He's like Mike. He's very much like
Yes.
Mike.
You married your dad.
In some ways, reliable. Yes, I guess. They're very different people, but
Cassie did the same thing, basically. They're very different, but yeah.
But I will say, when Ian was in jail, my dad called him. When Ian got out and was not struggling, my dad went to his house and played chess with him. When Ian, when it's been at the worst and I need help, he's the very first person to show up. Does he believe it's real? I don't know. I think for him, it's easier to think, everyone, this is who he is, and I'll do anything I can to make it better. So, and I think that's how he even parented me. I've told you before, both of my sisters are, really thrived in school. And I remember at one point his rule was, if you don't have a 3.0, you can't do anything, basically. And I clearly wasn't going to have that. And the only thing I had, like Ian, was I was a great track athlete. And so it became apparent at one point I wasn't going to have a 3.0. And I remember him calling me in and he said, I'm going to start weighing your grades differently. So I think it was a system where an A was worth 4 points in math, but it was worth 1 point in art. And he said, I'm going to give you 4 points for your A in art and your A in gym. Basically, he just gave me a pass. So even though I don't know that he would say, oh, Emily has ADHD, I think he taught me to maybe helicopter up. Doesn't matter what you call it, but we have to figure it out anyway.
Yeah. There was a difference.
Yeah.
And he saw you for just who you were.
Yeah.
Regardless of whatever it was.
And I think he saw Ian for who Ian was. I got caught up in, my kid's going to jail. My kid got kicked out of school. He got kicked off the soccer team. I got caught up in that. He never, ever did. This is Ian. He's in some trouble. Let's figure it out. And all of that stuff didn't matter to him at all. And that's what I appreciate most about him then and now in regards to my life and in regards to Ian's life, really. Because everyone else was like, he's a shithead. What have you done as parents? What's wrong with him? And, I was on that bus for a while, which I'm immensely embarrassed about. And I have spent many hours crying about. But
I always knew I was awesome. So
Well, I think it speaks to a lot of, when you said people ghosted you, everyone just appeared. But the people that, it tends to be the people that, care for you the most. And they're able to go, okay, what's really going on here? We all understand if, people are having trouble kind of giving some space, but then to act like they just don't exist. Well, all right, well, did I really exist?
Right.
Anyways, in the beginning? I don't know. But it's pretty awesome to be able to see, even if, you have those people that don't necessarily believe whatever it is, but still, hey, I love you.
Right.
I'm here for you. And that's, I think, an incredibly important thing.
I think about it too in the way that it affected, I had 3 little kids at home and they're hearing all this, right? I had moms come up to me, I heard Ian, and I'm like, I have a kid in 5th grade. And like, I know that she's hearing this too. That's hard in a small community. That's really hard. I remember one day, Annie came home from soccer practice sobbing, like truly just melted. and she had heard some other kids talking about Ian. She was, it was too much. So we're talking through that, and I go to Mia, my youngest, and I said, "Hon, Annie's having a hard day. How are you doing? Like, how are you managing this? Has anyone said anything to you?" And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "Let them." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
That's awesome.
So I think that, even it's the same thing as different person, same experience, different response, right? So I wish I had been Mia all along. I should have said, "I don't care what any of you think, say, do, how you see us or him," because that really takes some nerve to see through it. And as a parent, that's where I made my first mistake.
I think as a parent too, like, I think you should give yourself grace for sure, because I feel like at this point you have become 100% advocate, like trying to figure all this out. So like, I understand the
Yeah,
like, I think you
imagine
should
it was
give
hard
yourself
to have your 18-year-old go to jail.
some grace. Yeah. And I also think that, like, thinking of like Mia, I remember when my oldest brother went to jail, and I thought that he was just like, as a little sister, like looking up to your brother, like, I didn't care. Right. So like her attitude is like perfect. And I don't know. I guess just as a parent, you're looking at your child, like you expect something out of them. But as like a little sister, like
the loyalty was undying.
yeah. And it's just like, regardless, like they know your soul so well.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you just have this like, the way that I looked at my older brothers were just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I was like their
She
biggest
used to write
fan.
him letters when he was in jail. Oh my gosh, I wish I had them.
I think I do have
You're
them,
right, you have
actually,
them.
So cute.
But those relationships, and Andy's experience was also very real. So I'm not saying one's better or worse. But I think that the resilience that all 6 of us have now. Vincey, I mean, for sure, Vincey is undyingly loyal
What's the
to
age
Ian.
difference between you and Vince?
I'm 19, he's 17, so
About 2
Okay.
years.
Did your guys' journey have anything to do with him being like, I want to be homeschooled?
Vincey?
Yeah.
Well, Vincey actually also has ADHD. His presents really differently. He has a really difficult time with executive functioning. Anyway, when this all happened with Ian, I was like, why do I have this kid who is a natural mechanic? He is also can fit. Every single person that has a problem calls my son Vince. Me, Mike, Ian, all of his friends, everybody in the world. It's like one kid, it was a month or so ago, I'm sitting at the lunch table with Vince, and he's like, he says, I'll make up a name, "John's car's on fire, I gotta go." So someone's car starts on fire and they call Vince. I'm like, "What are you gonna do?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know."
Didn't he have a teacher bring a truck or something
Yeah,
to fix
to
like,
our
one
house
of
to
his-
fix-
for
yes.
Vince to? Okay, I
Yeah.
thought that was.
Kids, they sideswipe something they don't want their parents to know, they show up at our house. It's all, he can fix anything. He can fix people, he can fix friendships, he can fix vehicles, he can fix anything. Bones, he's cut casts off of people. He is the first person in our house he would stitch you up.
Yeah, he would. He'd
Without-
go get the medical.
Yeah.
He'd go get his sewing kit.
So putting him in
You
school.
need those people too. Yeah.
And he used to, text me from school. He's like, "Come get me. I can't stay here. I'm leaving. I'm walking out." And I realized, why am I forcing him to be there? Makes no sense.
Right.
So yeah, when this all happened with Ian, I was like, let's find another way.
Right.
Is this Vince's first year being homeschooled?
Second.
But like third because of COVID.
Yeah, kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's doing great. And he was unhappy before, miserable.
For
They
sure.
both were. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess maybe, what are the tools that you would look back now and tell your older self or younger self rather, and that maybe other people can kind of utilize, or like, how do we figure out what the problem is, even if you know the problem, right? Because you understood when you were a sophomore, you said you got diagnosed. So like, there's a difference between understanding the problem or knowing what it is and how to fix it, or not how to manage it and how to go through life with that. So how, like, what were the tools that you guys kind of discovered along the way?
I don't
you're
think
able
that I would say do anything differently. I think just keep it in the back of your mind that like, okay, I'm operating a little bit differently than other people, but unfortunately, because we live in this society, like you have to operate inside these like at least somewhat of a norm. You can't just like go out and do whatever. But I would say that, as soon as you start saying, it's okay, he has ADHD, it's like you still need to make it apparent that it's not okay to do that, but just understanding why you did do it is important, and then like trying to find ways that you can, healthily not have your impulse urges is important. But I don't think that you can really, like, I don't think she could have done something differently to make me want to go to school more. Like, maybe not go to school, but I still have to learn. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's not like we can't just not learn. We just have to do it a little bit differently.
Finding the right way that fits you.
Yeah.
I think that what he said early on, I can't remember the sentence he used, but I actually don't want him to be different. Like, when you say, how do we manage ADHD? I don't necessarily want to. Like, there's such great qualities. And
Right.
that's what I want to tell every parent. If you have a kid with ADHD, that's awesome. It's not a problem. Like,
Yeah,
it
like
is
just
not a problem.
understand that they're gonna have these impulses. Maybe not like
You're probably going to have to deal with more phone calls from the school.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and I don't, and I am all. I think I'll be one of the first people to say, like, I think some of these things we don't need to manage.
Right.
We don't need to treat these
We need
things.
to understand them.
Naturally, if I've never been against, medicines and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Either if it's something that you need to do something with, but it's, how do you manage your life to, kind of fit in,
Yeah. So there's some,
with all the structure that's being tried to placed around you.
first of all, medication does work. ADHD medication can be amazing. It really does change that neurochemistry in your brain. So for some people, it's life-changing and wonderful. I take it sporadically because there are days that I need to do things that I know I'm not capable of doing. I take a low dose and I take it when I need it, and Mike will tell you, he'll say, did you take it? Like, there are days that there are things that I can't do that I need to do. So I will take it sporadic. He doesn't take it at all. However, what we learned there are other things that you can do once you have the understanding. So Ian, we've said before, went to jail. It was a series of events that started with, how many speeding tickets?
4 or 5.
4 or 5, 12 points on his license. What I know now is that giving Ian a car that drives that fast is a terrible, terrible idea. I could give him medication and he'd probably slow down. What he drives now is a massive, I don't know what it is. What's it called?
Just truck.
It's a big truck with big tires. It doesn't drive that way.
Right.
So
Doesn't
now
go over 80.
Yeah.
I'm reducing the likelihood that
Doesn't
he's
tend
going to
to.
be get pulled over for going 120 with 10 points on his license
Right.
because he put himself in a different vehicle.
Right.
Looking back now, when I was 16, my dad bought me the coolest car ever. The Mennonite kids up the road had a Pontiac Ventura. He took the engine out and basically put a lawnmower engine in it. So even though we weren't calling it ADHD, he was managing it by managing this symptom. So I wasn't taking Adderall, but
She physically couldn't drive her
physically
car
couldn't
fast.
drive my car that fast. So you can, those are the things, you can use medication, it works. You can also put your kid in a different car. You can also, have them get a job that is physical. You can also, wake them up and have them run 5 miles before school. You can also make damn certain they don't take recess away from your kid because it makes it worse for everybody. So there are so many things you can do.
Also, I think that makes me think of something. When you get in trouble in elementary school, the first thing they do is take away recess.
Right.
So you're acting out, you're being impulsive in class, and you need to go outside, and then they punish you by taking that away. And it's just horrible.
Horrible.
Yeah, and then it puts you in the frame of mind, well, I'm already in trouble now.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Screw
get
it.
what I want. So, yeah, why not
Yeah.
keep on
Mhm.
doing whatever's annoying them?
And he sat in the hallway for his 5th grade. Basically sat in the hallway for 5th grade.
Yeah.
And, then you're out there. All you're doing is looking for stimulation. The likelihood of you
Right.
getting in trouble is
I'm
like,
chucking something down that hallway for sure. Yeah.
I wanted to say, at the time I didn't know it was ADHD. I wanted to say to her, you're making it worse. But then what they would say to me is like, be a better parent, manage your kid.
Yeah, well, that's so sad because it's that'd be like the same thing of if somebody was going to school and they just didn't understand math, like they had a
Right.
really hard time with math, or they were dyslexic
Mhm.
and had a really hard time with reading. Well, do better.
Right.
Like what? What do you mean?
Try
Do
harder.
like we try. I'm trying as hard as I
Yeah.
can, but like I think you said it well. Maybe putting ourselves in a different metaphorical vehicle
Yeah.
for life to approach it
Yes.
differently and whatever fits
Yeah.
whatever you need. But it also is maybe not going to give you too much speed.
Yeah.
To,
Right.
Yeah, I can
Right.
understand that.
So what is it that you're doing with the one-on-one yoga with people that have, ADHD?
So what we also know, ironically, and now that I look back, the reason I do this thing called yoga, there are tools inherent within the yoga practice that are immensely helpful for people that have ADHD. Things like a fixed point of focus is something that you can train so that if you think about it, every time you look around the room, every time your eyes fix on something new, it's input, right? There's more information to process. So someone that has ADHD who is looking for a dopamine kick is searching. The minute they get bored, they're looking. Can I throw the water bottle out the window? Can I throw a spitball at the teacher? So training a fixed gaze can change the way that your brain works so that you're not constantly searching. That's one thing. So we can use fixed gaze to train the brain to stop that constant search for dopamine, essentially for dopamine. It's for input, but so that's one thing. Breath work. We know that someone that has ADHD tends to be upregulated all the time. If you probably put your hand on his heart, it's like he's constantly like vibrating. And when you sit by Ian, sometimes you feel that I'm like, just move away because you're like taking energy from me. I can't. So we know that an exhale can help you move into a parasympathetic state. So if we can train people to use their breath to slow the F down, that it works. We also know that sometimes it's like putting fire with fire. You need to like let the fire burn out. So I love hot power yoga. What that lets me do is burn off all of that, like that hyperactivity, so that I can function on this realm that works for other people. So
Which is
for Ian,
what I
it
was
was
talking
soccer
about. Yeah,
at
like
the gym.
soccer or lifting or going on a run, and you get like a runner's high almost.
It's almost like you're always working in excess and you have to take something out to be able to function. So that physicality, that intense, and people do it in all kinds of ways. But yoga works, soccer works, gym works, whatever it is, can just kind of take a lot of that excess out and let you kind of settle. And yoga's so good at that. So what I'm trying to do with the one-on-one sessions is essentially what I have now. I'm an ADHD life coach. I don't know what that means, but it's a certification you can get. Basically, it's understanding it. What are you doing? How are you getting in your own way? Like, how are you stepping on your own feet? And what can we do to let you settle and function in the world that you're in, whatever that is. I wish I had done that for Ian. He had some tools of his own that he was using, and I was trying to take those away. Okay, you're not allowed to smoke weed. You're not allowed to play soccer. You're not allowed to, be angry. You're not allowed to, be rude and disrespectful. I should have let all of that kind of burn it out, burn it off, The thing about yoga is it's already there. So you can go to yoga class and it happens without you knowing it. I'm going to ask you to fix your gaze. I'm going to ask you to manage your breath. I'm going to ask you to do some interoceptive work. How do you feel on the inside? And so it's just there. Now, is it everyone's Kool-Aid? Probably not. But for some people, it will probably be immensely helpful. For me, it's life-changing.
How much do you think like that self-awareness and realizing it helps to kickstart those things? Because I feel like you may stumble upon soccer or you may stumble upon yoga and you don't realize it's working. I guess how did you get to the point of going, oh, these things make sense now because I understand these? Like, how much of that self-awareness do you think really help?
You just feel it.
It's a physical feeling in your whole body and mind after you. Like, her yoga would be for me is like a wrestling or jiu-jitsu. It's like I go into the flow state. I'm focused on my breathing. I'm focused on a fixed point. I'm not thinking. And when that's done, I physically feel the results in my body. I feel myself
Settle.
like settle and relax. And
When was the moment? Do you remember like the moment that you realized that, like you connected those two things, or was it just always kind of intrinsic and it just kind of eventually
In
you
him, you could see
recognized
it.
it?
I would put him on a soccer field or in the ocean. I was like, oh my God.
for
Oh
when
my
I
God,
was a
Mike,
little
look.
kid, I literally went to like 2 sports practices a day. Like I would go to school, get home, go to wrestling practice, get done with wrestling practice, go to soccer practice, go home, eat dinner, and go to sleep. And it was like, so the whole time I was just
I used to sit
physically
in my lawn
simulated.
chair in the lawn. I was like, kick the soccer ball 1,000 times. And I would count
Yeah.
1,000 more, 1,000 more. I remember driving to Washington, D.C. and stopping and being like, run up that hill 10 times, you can get back in the car. So it was so obvious, so obvious that you couldn't deny it.
But we didn't know that it was ADHD. It was just
Right.
like, I need to tire my kid out so he's not annoying.
Right.
Yeah.
I
I
feel like-
remember.
oh, sorry. Go
Go
ahead. I feel like the self-awareness part is more beneficial when maybe you want to have a relationship. So you can say like, this is what I need. You
Mhm.
know, like I'm going to need to do these things and I'm going to need you to be okay with these
Mhm.
things. It's probably more important for that than it is like with your own internal, because you've found something. Like you said, you don't know what it is. You just know that
Mhm.
I feel better when I
Mhm.
do it. I feel like having that self-awareness is probably more beneficial for coworkers and trying to have a romantic relationship and
Sure.
then relating to your kids or your siblings.
Because Mike knows you have to go to yoga to be
Yeah.
better. Not better, but
Balanced.
To be
Balanced.
human, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember as a child, I distinctly remember the physical feeling in my body. I was mad about something and I was a good runner. It was easy for me. And I remember running so hard that I was in the hayfield at the top of the hill. I fell over and I could feel my heart like pounding in my chest. And I had this sense of like, oh my God, now I feel good. But it took all that. The thing is, you have to do that all the time. And it's
Every day.
exhausting. But that's just the reality. That's how it is. And now I know that that's how it is. I have to do that, or I just feel, it's almost like you feel like you're going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine being told to sit in a chair and feeling that way, right? So I knew, I didn't know I knew it then, but it was the first time I remember thinking, oh my God, okay, like this actually feels good. So when I'm in a yoga class, in all honesty, we get through sun A, sun B's, I'm so bored. I'm like looking at the clock. I'm like, how much longer? And then all of a sudden class gets hard and I'm like, okay, now this is fun. Not everyone's like that. Some people love the
So how are you handling, I read that you were doing a little bit more yin, right? You were
Mhm.
finding a little bit more stretch. So how do you handle 60 minutes of a yin practice? Like, is that more difficult or do you have to go run 5 miles before you can come to class?
10 years ago, I would have had to. And I don't think I could put yin in a yin now. I think he would erupt. But I have done enough work to train my brain, my breath, my gaze, my interoceptive awareness that I can do it now.
So it almost
You're
sounds like a
using the whole-
workout in
It's work.
itself.
You're using the whole yoga practice in the class, like how it should be used. You're not just
Yeah.
doing the movements. You're doing
It's taken
the
me
breath and
15
all of it.
minutes
Yeah.
years to get here, Cass. I wouldn't have sat in a yin class if you'd paid me $1 million at his age. It wouldn't have happened. And I wouldn't ask him to do it now. I don't think he's there. I think you have to grow into this thing, you know? And essentially, as soon as you grow into it, you kind of grow out of it. Now I can feel it coming a bit.
Mhm.
I also know that there are things that I have to do to live with Mike. Like you say, to be in this relationship with Mike, there are things that I have to do to make it work for him.
I think we all have to do that,
Right.
regardless, right? So it's
Regardless of what it is.
Right, yeah,
He has to do
absolutely.
things to deal with me. And when you have kids, we all do that for each other.
Yeah, I'm getting a firsthand lesson on that because we have an 11-year-old essentially, and I mean she'll be but well will be she's getting so old. But like you're realizing this person, like this little human being, is turning
Right.
into a person.
Right.
And you're like, oh, like, and this is not like what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
You know, like because you're like
Uh-huh.
regardless of how alike she is of myself or Cassie, it's like, oh,
She's your own person.
You're
too.
your own little thing that we never.
Your own little set of problems.
Yeah, and we never would have saw any of some of this coming. So it's like, okay, like I have to learn how to live with you.
Right.
You know, even though I created you,
Right.
like I have to learn how to deal with you
and how to let you thrive
Yeah.
in a different way than I might. That's hard. And, teachers would say that to me all the time. I have no trouble with Annie and Mia. I'm like, yeah, no shit. I don't either. It's, but, and I will.
Did they expect trouble? They were like, oh, these boys have been through school. Like, do they expect it?
I think Mia would say to me now, she's like, I think teachers don't like me. I think coaches don't like me because they think that I also will be this way. And so I would say both girls, probably Mia more because she has more tendencies than Ian does. I think she's up against it more because she wasn't round one. So she's always trying to prove herself as her own person because she does have so many similarities. Annie's so different. She's just such a different person that you instantly know it's not going to be the same set of problems with Annie.
Vinny had some of the same problems.
Oh, Vinny has a lot of the same problems. So, and that's part of the reason I don't have him in school. It's part of the reason
because you guys are alike, or because teachers expect that it's going to be the same.
Both
or both.
Both.
We're not alike in that way. It's just like I don't know how to explain it.
Vincy is more like Ian's a little more socially savvy. He can make it work for himself. Vincy is just like not doing it.
Yeah, he's just like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Or I don't care if you don't like me. I'm not going to change my behavior to please you at all.
Right.
So it's same stuff, different presentation. Ian's like, I'm going to take full advantage of the situation. I'm going to make it pay off for me. And you're not even going to know. Like, I'm drinking your Kool-Aid. Vincy will just say, don't even try to feed me. I'm not taking the bait. There's no chance in hell I'm going to sit here and do this thing. So it's different, but equally difficult.
Right. Well, I think, too, we so, like we've talked about, people can be so common in one way.
Yeah.
But very different in another.
Yeah.
I've talked to people where, even on the show, where I'm like, the subjects and the things that we discuss and whatever it is, like we're so different people, live different lives and everything else. But then you sit down and have a conversation with somebody like, our brains work real similar, and it's kind of freaking me out right now. We're not going to get anything accomplished here, But you could. It's so neat to just. I think maybe that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like we often think of humans on this like spectrum, but it is a spectrum, but it's almost like a 3D. Spectrum.
Yeah.
It's not just one end or the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's this whole, globe of you could be anywhere at any point in the map, and being able to learn how to, I guess, we talk about self-awareness a lot, but it's so that you can understand, okay, this is how I am.
Right.
People are different. So how do I like help myself interact with these people so they don't think I'm a Looney Tune?
Right.
So it's like sometimes like we do have a little bit of that, not necessarily changing who we are for other people, but sometimes I like to think it was like softening the blow before they really get to know me,
right.
And then some people are just like, no, F off. This is like, I'm not
going to work.
And I can appreciate that in both,
Interestingly, Cass, when you're talking about something that is not yoga related, but that I would teach anyone that was coming to me for one-on-one help with managing ADHD is loyalty, as silly as it sounds, is so important. You have to, and you're in a marriage, it. Loyalty is, it has to be step one. I'm loyal to you as you are, as this person, regardless of anything else. And if you have kids, it's the reason you don't kick them out of the house the minute they're difficult, right? You have to remain loyal because everything is unknown. And like you said, it's a 3D model, and I can't predict anything about who you are, how things are going to turn out. So I have to commit to that long-term loyalty before we do anything else. I remember they brought us all in. Ian was in counseling. Things were terrible. They brought all of my kids in. They lined them up in the therapist bench.
It's a good story.
They have Ian in one chair. We're all looking at them, and the counselor says, "So, how are you guys doing?" And they're all sitting there, cross-armed. They're like, "Fine." Any problems with Ian? No, none of them. None of them. So he went on for I don't know how long,
Yeah, who
trying to
knew?
get them all to say that Ian was a shithead. And 10 minutes in, he's like, "This isn't going to work." He just like kicks them all out of the office. But at that point, I was so, in a shitty way, I agreed to having them come in because I wanted Ian to feel guilty about how we were all suffering because of what he was doing. When I was honest about why I let that happen, I thought maybe if he felt guilty enough because of them that he would behave.
So, do you think that if your siblings or your other children wouldn't have been in front of a therapist, like, so I feel like there's that loyalty, like I'm not going to talk shit or I'm not going to bring up, family matters in front of this person. Do you think it would have been beneficial if you were at home in a private setting and they're like, Ian, I love you and I'm loyal to you, but you're fucking up here? Or were they just like across the board?
Maybe.
Or would that be beneficial? Because like sometimes I have to be like, call them out on shit that like you're messing this up. Or is it just like, I guess for loyalty, like where is that line
Yeah,
of
I
like
don't
also
know.
being just really honest with, with
I think they were too young at that
They
point.
were too young, and Ian's the oldest, and they
Like
loved.
the girls were probably like 8 and 9
Yeah.
when that happened.
that is pretty young, yeah.
They covered for him. Oh my God. All 3 of them. They covered for him over. I would straight up ask them, and they would lie to my face. Straight up. Is that good or bad? I don't know. But that's what it was. I realized the minute I did that, I realized I can't use my other kids against Ian.
Yeah.
That's a terrible decision.
We are trying to teach that with Kai. Like she'll tattletale on her cousins, and we're like,
Give your mouth shut, kid.
like stitches get stitches. Like shut up. Like unless somebody is in physical harm, like you don't tattle on them.
Yeah.
Right.
She's like, I thought I was supposed to like be honest. We're like, not
No.
like that.
Anybody
No,
else,
like
not your cousins.
no, like because you don't have siblings, right? So like those are the closest things you have. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to learn that with your friends too. Like I know I want you to be honest with me, but also like
There are times.
you have to just not like if they're not in physical harm, like or they're not gonna hurt somebody else, like shut up. Like just keep it,
Yeah.
be loyal. Like we've had that conversation multiple times.
There were times Vincey said to me, "Don't ask me that. I won't answer it."
Good answer.
Straight up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how he
I
is.
think that's a lot of it too. Like you talked about, when you're in, a marriage or, a family relationship or a friendship or anything like that, there's those times there where it's like, all right, I'm not going to spread anyone else's business to other people, but to have somebody that stands behind you 100% loyally. And then when you get behind closed doors, also has the ability to say, hey, bro,
Yeah.
you're fucking this up right now.
Did my dad ever say that to you? You're fucking this up? Or did he just stay loyal?
Basically.
Yeah, not so many words.
Not so many
I mean, I
words,
feel like
but
we
Yeah.
all need somebody
talk.
who's
Yes.
willing to say, like,
Sure.
Yeah.
like you said, behind closed doors or whatever. So you're not airing your, but like you have to have somebody say,
Yes.
like,
Checking you.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, because that also puts that like not consolidates. It really like seals that relationship. They go, okay, this person has my back. They're willing to say these things in private, but no,
Yeah.
like there's no at no point have I ever heard them like do this, like tell anybody else
Right.
this, talk about this.
There's no
But-
dirty laundry.
Yeah, and then they're the person that's always there for me, but they're
Yeah.
also there to help keep me straight. I think that's one of the things that by far and large has helped our marriage so much.
Yeah.
And what makes me love her so much is she, has that ability to stand behind me
Regardless.
regardless. And then it's, hey,
Yeah.
we should probably talk about this.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, but no one and as soon as you start running out of people that, they pretend to like you or they pretend to care about you, and then they're spreading your shit, or they just say, meh, I'm wiping my hands and, we're done. Like, see you later.
Yeah.
Like that can be difficult too. So it's really special to have, siblings and people that will
Yeah.
have your back.
And I think that's when I got in trouble. When I started running out of those people, when everyone was jumping off the Ian train, I stepped off too. I shouldn't have. We're back there, but it took a lot to get back there. For him and for me. But yeah, when those people start disappearing, it's even more important Makes me sound like a fucking terrible person that I like threw my kid
Well,
under the
I
bus.
know. I think so too. As a parent, though, that's a whole different realm.
It's a whole different
being a
realm that
parent because it's
I would say, if I could say anything, if you have a kid with ADHD, you know them. Don't let anyone tell you that they're a bad person, because a lot of the manifestations of ADHD make them look like a bad person. And you can't get caught up in that. You have to, I don't know. Why are you moving your chair around?
he's fine. You can stand up if you want to and
That's-
walk around. I don't care.
Yeah.
We've had Rose on the show, and she twice, maybe 3 times, I'm not sure. She lost her son to an overdose, and she gave this very same advice that, like, you know your kids, but you know they mess up and now they're addicted, and you see is the addict part, and it's so it's not easy, but it's easier to see that part of them than who you know they actually are. And you know, like, he had went through rehab multiple times, and it's the saddest story ever. But she would say the same thing. Like, she doesn't say just like, you know, don't give up on your kids for sure, but she said the same thing, like, don't forget who they really are. Like, this is a problem. This is not who they are. This is an actual.
It's a separate problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's like the biggest thing I actually took away from when I went to jail was like, I was in there and every other person that I was in there with had done meth, heroin, all the other pills. Like, I was the only person in there who had never experienced these things, but they were all still people. Like, they were all still, obviously they're still people, but you know, they had the same feelings and worries and anxieties that I did. And when they're talking to you about it, it's like, oh, this is like a disease. This is something that we need to change how we're looking at it. And like, these people can't help it. You know, they get stuck in this cycle, and it really gets a hold of them. And that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It's just like, it really got a hold of them, and they can't shake it. And it sucks.
Yeah, and I think it's both of you. It's kind of the people often look at the symptom or the symptoms and what's happening because of something else, not why is this happening?
Right.
You know, like you said, you've mentioned that over and over. You realize that, okay, these are things that are happening that aren't great, but it's not just because doing it because he wants to.
Right. No one wants to be in jail. I guarantee
right.
it.
I don't. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of people I think would sign up for that freely. So it's like, all right, why? You know, why are these things manifesting this way, and what are they manifesting from? You know, like, so that's a really good perspective to look on issues. You know, whatever it might be.
We didn't see him for 21 days. There was no visitation, and he would call us and say, "COVID." Right? Oh, yeah. He would talk about these people, and he's like, "Mom, this, you know, I don't remember names specifically, but amazing people, like terrible, terrible circumstances." And, you know, he was living that.
And are they going through like detox probably because they're locked up?
Oh my God, yeah, it was
was
insane. And it was like, Worcester court is just so like rough. And like, they would like, literally, I was in there with like 75-year-old men who were like going through withdrawals, and it's like, why are you putting this person in a cell? Like, I have not seen him get out of bed in 4 days. He's not like physically and mentally okay. You can't just like put him in here to rot. Like, he literally, I was worried he was gonna die when we were in there. Like, that was just so crazy to me to see. And like, yeah, they were definitely detoxing.
My best friend in high school, we were sophomores. Her dad was an alcoholic, and he had spent time in and out. He got arrested for a DUI, and he died in the Wayne County jail because he was going through detox, and he was complaining of chest pain, and they basically were like, "You're drunk, get over it." And he just didn't get up in the morning, and it was awful. Like, and the thing is like, I knew him as like a person, like I was
as a human,
we spent
right?
time there, yeah, and we'd be like,
right.
"Oh, Joel's drunk again," but like that was the norm, and he was such like he was so funny, and he just was like, and I like fall into it too, that you just be like, that person's an addict,
right?
But like, no, that's one part of them. And it's just so easy to just only see that part of them. And it's just, I wish Tony was here because he works with an addiction clinic. And so he really spends most of his time just like having like a human to human conversation with them. And it seems like it makes, like, people are surprised that somebody in the medical field is actually willing to sit down and just have a conversation with them.
And not bullshit.
Exactly.
Around the bullshit.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm
treat them like a
interested.
person.
Do you think jail changed you?
Yeah.
In a good way or a bad
absolutely,
way?
for sure, it changed me.
In a good way?
In a
Bad
good way, but I also really quickly realized when I got out of jail, how easy it would be to go back because you have no responsibilities and everything's taken care of. You kind of just like live. And so I can see how someone would really easily go. I can see how someone who doesn't have a lot going for them in the first place, how it would be easy to go, it's not that bad. You know, like I can commit a crime, maybe try and make some money, and if I go back, it's not the end of the world. Jail's it's not a bad thing for those people. Like some of those people literally don't mind being there. It's like it's not actually helping them change their behavior or anything.
Right. That's when you realize how many people, when they get out, go back to probably situations that are worse than being in jail. So it's like you understand. It's like, okay, like you see how this pattern just
it's really
continues
easy
to repeat.
Develop a pattern. Yeah,
when it's a shame when you think about the people that were imprisoning for certain things, and instead of spending the time and effort and money on that, and okay, you did something wrong. Let's figure out what the base problem is here. Like, why are these things happening the way they are? I don't think you're never going to help everybody.
Right.
And you get a unique opportunity when these people are in jail because they're detoxed, they're sober, they're actually thinking straight. But the thing is, as soon as you let them out, they're gonna go back to the same stuff. Like I was with a 19-year-old kid, like playing chess with him, like talking about how he was gonna get his life on track. He had been in jail for 30 days, so he was completely sober. And he wanted to do better, and then he got out and he died the next day because he like took his original dose and it was too much and he overdosed and died. But I mean, that was like a 19-year-old kid that I was talking to like 2 days before that happened, and he wanted to do better.
Do you know what he was in for? Like, was there not a reason? Like,
it was probation violation, a drug.
So like they were aware that he was under the influence of things. They probably saw detox and it wasn't like a forced halfway house or something. Like, so this just it's the system is so not set up to help support someone after they are in jail.
Right. He must have had like a original charge, got on probation, and then he failed a drug test for probation, and then that probation violation ended him up in jail again.
I've never asked you this, but I'm asking you here in front of these two. You can get out of going to jail for what Ian did. You can get out of going to jail. He got caught driving on a suspended license. Mike and I chose not to get him a lawyer. We chose not to fight it. We said, if you want to get a lawyer, you pay for it. This is your problem now. You can deal with it. Ian chose to defend himself, and then he had made a couple of other choices, chose not to do this other program with an officer that he had major conflict with, and decided he would go to jail. I want to know if you think we should have tried to get you out of that and not had you go, or because people get out of jail for serious shit. If you have a right lawyer and you pay enough money.
Got enough money, yeah.
We didn't do that. Now I want to know if you think we should have or not.
Well,
I regretted it. The minute he called me from there, I was like, we fucked up. I should have gotten the lawyer. I don't know.
Well, so what I did first was I looked up what I was being charged with, and it said mandatory 3 days in jail. So I went, all right, even if I get a lawyer and I pay all this money, I would have to pay for the lawyer myself. Even if I get the lawyer, I'm still going to go to jail. So I just pled guilty. And the judge took that as me being like arrogant and like, oh, I don't really care that I committed a crime. Like, whatever, I'm guilty. But really, I was just like, I don't want to pay for a lawyer. I know I'm going to go to jail anyway. Let's just get it over with. So I don't think so. I think it.
So that's kind of fucked up. Like, you're honest, you tell the truth, but
you can never plead guilty.
But it comes off as like
they get mad. Yeah, apparently. And I didn't know that. I thought that he would be like, "Oh, this kid's like being accountable." But
yeah,
like,
he's
no,
taking
he thought I was
on
being
what
a
he
dickhead.
did.
Yeah.
Huh.
And that's what the lawyer, I called because I've used this lawyer before for traffic incidents. And I called him. I was like, hey, I pled guilty and this guy hit me with like 20 days in jail. And he was like, yeah, that judge is a dick. He thought you
Don't
were
do that.
like, he thought you were trying to, be arrogant.
Yeah, and you realize even if the system was great, which I think we can all agree that the system's, has some
Mhm.
broken
Yeah.
pieces and flaws in it, it's still down to a human that you go up
Mhm.
against, and like they're having a bad day,
Mhm.
or if they're just not a nice person, like
Right.
Yeah. Or if they misunderstand you, it's
Yeah,
just
like,
over.
And Ian had made a ton of mistakes before that. Like none of us were
Right.
denying the fact that he had been in, but we were like at that point we were getting a handle on it, and it was a major like, oh shit. And he, had terrible interactions with this probation officer that he had.
Yeah. Basically, they gave me the option to do 17 days on house arrest and then still do the 3 mandatory days in jail. But I had my medical marijuana card at the time, and I'd been smoking for like probably 2 years. So it's like really in my system. And when I went to go meet with the home arrest officer, I told him I had my medical card, and he just went, "Oh, I don't recognize that. Like that doesn't matter to me. You still have to pass a drug test if you want to get on house arrest." And I was like, "How do you want me to do that? I've been legally smoking weed for 2 years
Right.
straight. Like this isn't out of my system for another 4 months, you know?" And he basically told me, "You can't go on home arrest until you've completely passed a drug test." He was going to drug test me twice a week until I passed a drug test. And then he was going to put me on the wait list to start the home arrest. And the whole time I was on the wait list, I had to continue to pass drug tests. And then the whole time I was on home arrest, which he said it could be a 2-month wait list, I would have to pass drug tests. So I
So
was
you could
like,
be in and out of jail like 6 times by then.
yeah, I was like,
Right.
whatever.
And you're
He's-
not
Screw
allowed.
you,
I
dude.
mean, you're allowed to take as much Adderall as you want,
Yeah,
which is
so
basically
stupid.
meth, but you can't smoke weed.
Right.
Yeah, that's-
Whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for something that helps you keep your life
Right.
balanced and keep you in check, and that's another thing we've talked about a lot too. It's like the pharmaceuticals, and
Right.
everything. Like I
nuts.
I love the
Mhm.
medical and pharmaceutical industry, because kind of keeps my wife alive.
Need it.
Right.
But also,
But they'd rather sell us Adderall for him than have him smoke,
Right.
smoke weed.
Yeah, and you look
Yeah,
at all of the
whatever.
historic like issues with that, and the painkiller.
Mhm.
That's a whole different topic, I
Mhm.
guess, for a different day. But it's like, man, like,
But it's real.
yeah, it's so
And on
real.
top of that, they told him he couldn't work he was serving at the steakhouse. He couldn't work there because there was alcohol. So he would
Alcohol,
have
yeah.
6 months potentially of no income.
Right.
And he was like, fuck it, I'll go to jail for 3 days and get back to my job. And
20.
Right.
ended up going for,
Yeah.
Yeah, but then
little
you
bit
realize
longer.
it for those people that don't have options, right, and then end up
Right.
in those spots. If it's a 2-month stint,
Mhm.
2 months, it's like, 2 months in jail, that's nothing.
Mhm.
Well, it is when you lose your job
Right.
and then you can't pay your bills, and most people are paycheck to paycheck as
Mhm.
it is. So then you lose your apartment or your car, or now you've done 2 months for something silly,
Mhm.
and you come out and you have absolutely nothing.
And
Mhm.
everybody knows you've been to jail.
Right.
And everyone has an opinion about it.
Right. So it's like,
I mean-
how are we supposed to, this is something I like to think of a lot, and we've talked a lot about, is, how does somebody come back? We have to give people the space and the tools and the ability to come back into
Mhm.
society.
Right.
For 90% of the people out there that do something bad, there's a chance for them to come back into society if we allow it, and if we have the tools and the capabilities, and if we accept them back, and we realize that a lot of the people that want to kind of put a block on those items, it seems like, what's in your
Mhm.
past? Well, how many skeletons are in your
Right.
closet that you just
Mhm.
never got caught for?
That's
Because I've done plenty of things, like you mentioned earlier, that I've done plenty of things that if I would have gotten caught, like my
Yeah.
trajectory may have been much, much different.
Mhm.
And it wasn't necessarily always great. So anyways, but,
But I think you're exactly right. And really, it's the reason I'm here and asked Ian to be here. We are so judgmental as a culture that if someone screws up like that, we punish them by ghosting them or canceling them or excommunicating
Yeah.
them or whatever. We don't bring them back in.
Mhm.
So the minute we are unwilling to talk about having ADHD, going to jail, getting kicked out of school, the minute we try to hide that within our family and not let other people know that my kid, I have a business downtown, my husband does too. The minute I try to hide that, it's the very minute that I put him in a worse position.
Mm.
What I should have done is said, all of you that are friends with me, you need to step up now. You need to show up for him. You need to call him while he's in jail. You need to invite him to dinner the minute he gets out. You need to envelop him to bring him back. Instead, what happens is everyone just disappears.
Yeah.
I should have managed that better. As a community, I think we need to manage it better. But what we do instead is we judge people and we alienate them when they make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's a pattern that, most of us do it.
Mhm.
I was doing it. When we don't talk about this kind of thing, alcoholism, drug addiction, ADHD, whatever it is, being addicted to porn, let's say, any of those things, the minute we hide them, the likelihood of that person recovering or thriving goes down, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And anybody else who's struggling with that, right? Like, it takes one person to stand up and say, this is the journey that I had. This is where I struggled. This is how I got over those, to just start a blueprint for somebody else to do better faster.
Yeah.
It takes, somebody needs to stand up, and it's not easy, right? I just love that
terrible.
Ian's like,
I know.
everything's on the table.
Are you going
Like-
to talk about that? Really?
Like, it's there, right? Like, people know.
Yeah.
Like, hiding
Yeah.
it is probably just going to fester shame that you don't have or shouldn't have. It's just, it's there. So I don't know how many people are going to be able to listen to this, whether it's 5 days from now or 5 years from now, and be like, oh, maybe I can start
Mhm.
at 14 and figure this out.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah, for sure.
Ian and Emily gave me their blueprint of what works for them.
Yeah, and I
Or
think,
what didn't work.
Yeah, or what didn't work.
but I think seeing somebody else that you can connect with and go, hey, I have a similar story to that,
Right.
and being able to talk about it,
Mhm.
with other people, that can be, at least I know for myself and my issues that I've had in my past, and talking to other people, like, the more you can talk about it, the more it liberates you
Right.
from them. She mentioned Rose, and we had Rose and Dean. Dean is a guy who works, or he started the homeless hookup in Cleveland, and they provide a bunch of items, and they do a ton of things for the homeless community in like the Cleveland area. But he came out and talked about, he was an alcoholic. He went to the military. He was an alcoholic, basically lost everything, was homeless, and then, found somebody that said, hey, like, you're not hopeless. Like, let's do something about this.
Right.
And he was able to, pull himself out. And now he's one of those people doing that for others. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you're not hopeless. Like, we can figure this out.
Right.
Like, and the vast majority of time when you think you're down the gutter and nothing's ever going to change and you're going to be hopeless the rest of your life. Like, well, if you don't try to liberate yourself, but sometimes we need people, a lot of times we need someone to reach out their hand and go, hey,
Yeah.
I can help out. So I guess what would be your advice for people that, maybe can connect with your story and to be able to, kind of grasp life for themselves and find their own path?
I would say my thing was like, with starting my own company, was like, I'm gonna fail as many times as I do, and every time I fail, I'm gonna learn something from it, and I'm not gonna make that failure again. So, I mean, that's how I think you kind of have to walk through life, is just like, I know I'm gonna fail. I know it's inevitable. I'm ready for it to happen so that I can learn, internalize the information, and not make that same mistake again.
That's fantastic. Fail as many times as it takes to succeed.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome.
What would you say for someone who had ADHD? Who was a kid, a 6-year-old you?
Not to suppress anything. I would say stand up in class and blurt it out. I would say as soon as you start, trying to suppress your mind, you're going to drive yourself crazy. I think you just need to, it's kind of up to the parents and the teachers, for kids that are that young, to like give them more recess and, make your classroom more engaging instead of just standing up in the room and, giving a speech. I think like some of the I don't know what they call them, but like we would have teachers come in and grab like 3 kids and take them to their classroom and like only teach with those 3 kids. I think that would be really helpful for little kids with ADHD to have that like one-on-one, because you're constantly engaged in learning and doing something. It's really hard when you're little and there's a lot going on and you're not being held accountable all the time.
Takes some extra effort for sure.
Yeah. And I don't think that you can put in that extra effort. When you're 6, you don't understand. So you can't teach a 6-year-old to suppress their ADHD urges for 6 hours at school.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen.
And I think anytime you suppress, it turns into depression, right? I
Makes
can't
it
be
worse,
who I
yeah.
am because, anything at all. And depression is scary. ADHD is not, in my mind. It's depression, it's anxiety, it's panic attacks. Those things are scary.
What about you, Emily? Seems like you may have some regrets by the
I
way
have
you
a lot
said
of regrets. I have
things,
a lot
how
of
you
regrets.
handle things.
I also, I mean, you have to, what happens now is you have a kid who gets in trouble. They say, go to your doctor. He probably has ADHD. They get an ADHD diagnosis, and now everything's justified. Your kid's a shit because they have ADHD. But there's no training. There's no like, your kid, they give you an IEP and they put you in a separate room or whatever, but there's no one that says, you need an organizational coach. You need to learn to, we need to practice executive function. We need to teach you how to put things in order. There's no skills training to help kids with ADHD. It's just now it's a label and they can justify, teachers can justify, kids can justify. I did it because I have ADHD. Teachers can justify. I kicked him out of the room because he couldn't sit still. So there's a huge gap between a diagnosis and thriving. What we tend to do is put kids in talk therapy and say, let's talk about it, right? There's a place for talk therapy, but until these kids learn to manage their own particular set of ADHD symptoms, nothing is going to change.
Because I couldn't have talked about it in 5th or 6th grade. I wouldn't have understood what was going through my brain at all.
It's the only brain he knew.
If you think about somebody who's been like sexually abused, they can't voice that. They maybe know what happened, but they can't verbalize that.
Right.
Like
What it's done to their thought process.
And what they're suppressing. Like they can't connect that. Like you're too young.
Yeah.
And by the time you're old enough to speak about it, how much is suppressed and how much is that festered? Is there depression? Is there anxiety? Like.
And a kid with ADHD brain has this impulse to do whatever. They don't know that the kid sitting beside them doesn't also have the same impulse, right? They think everyone does. So, even just teaching the kid, this is how your brain works. This is what you're going to be likely to do. This is going to fly or this isn't going to fly. So how can we put you in a position where you'll thrive? So I think that there has to be lots of ADHD one-on-one training. How can we teach this person to function better? Not change who they are, not want them to be different, but teach them how to work within the scope. There are lots of people who have ADHD who don't do this shit that he did. Lots of them. There's some tendencies, but they don't end up in jail. So each person needs to be looked at individually. Now, is that a drag? Yes. Can it be done? Yes. And it's training. You have to, the same as you train in the gym, you have to train your mind to work in a way that's going to keep you, in society in a reasonable way. And I don't mean that we all need to be the same, but you don't want to go to jail and you don't want to die in a car crash and you don't want to be addicted to cocaine. So, and I'm not exaggerating any of this. These things are real. They're real possibilities. How can we keep you working well with what you have? And that takes training. It just does. A diagnosis isn't anything but putting a word to it.
Yeah. I think it's an understanding of, all right, this is what I'm dealing with. This is the tools that I have. How do I go forward in life with the equipment that I have?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, to me, that's as simple as it is.
Get the right equipment, you can get the job done. If you don't have it, there's no chance. Yeah. And I know enough now. I have spent since the day this happened, I have spent every single day doing some training on ADHD, mindfulness, breath work, and, all of this stuff. I know enough now that I can help people figure that out. Now, am I the only one that can? Absolutely not. There are lots of people, and there's lots of ways. You can use medication and do the same thing. You can use, all different there's different ways to do this.
So if somebody is listening and they want to reach out for themselves or their child, whatever, how would somebody reach out to you? So like this one-on-one that you're doing, is it only like in the studio, or do you do like virtual visits with people, like
Right
for
now,
the
I
life
do
coaching?
I do it one-on-one. ADHD kids don't do well virtually.
Okay. So how would
I don't
somebody
do well
reach out?
virtually, so I get it.
It's rough.
So yeah, it's available at the studio, and it's the only way that I do it now. And really, I'm not a therapist. I am not a doctor. I am not a nutritionist. I'm a yoga teacher. The only tools I have are breathwork, mindfulness, and movement. That's it. Now, is that enough for some people? No. Is it right for some people? I hope. But I don't care what people do to make this thing work for them, unless it's gonna be harmful. And that's when people get depressed or they feel suppressed. That's where anyone who gets depressed or feels suppressed, regardless of what it is, if you're transgender and you feel that way, it turns into depression most of the time, right? So it doesn't matter what the source is. What we want to do is stop that trajectory with whatever tools work. Maybe it's a combination. I use a combination of yoga and Adderall. Ian does different things. He goes to jiu-jitsu, he goes to the gym, he works at a physical job, and he uses some weed. Two people, completely different medication, if you want to call it that.
Well, I think it all starts with the understanding.
You
right?
have
And
to
then-
understand it.
and the support from the people around you and the understanding of those people, right?
Right.
So they understand what's
Yeah.
going on.
And you have to see it as a superpower too. It's not.
At least personally, I don't look at it as like a hindrance. I look at it as like I'm actually able to process some more. I can do more than I think I would be able to normally.
Did it take you a while to have that mindset?
Yeah, for sure.
It did. Okay.
Especially when I didn't understand it before, and then when you're first like learning it, you're like, I have a mental condition. Like
That's scary.
That's weird.
Yeah. Well, it's just the labeling, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know, at least from an outsider, knowing of you, Emily, for a few years, obviously, she talked about you and she'd come home and just rave, and seeing all the things that you do and, sitting across from a, 19-year-old that started a business, over a year ago, right when you turn 18, like, it's pretty impressive, so using that superpower to be able to, accomplish things is just, that's, how many, what you have to be, I wonder what the percentage is of like, let alone like you running your own business. Most people don't have what it takes to do that, period. Let alone, doing multiple or, starting when you're 18 and being, it's not like you're selling lemonade. That's great. That's great. Like, or like mowing lawns, like, or like some people take mowing lawns into like, I've known people done that too. Like, all right, I'm going to start.
Something massive.
Yeah. They're mowing lawns at 18. Next thing you know, they're 20s and they're
have an excavation company.
Yeah. And they're running this giant business.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to use mowing lawns but I think it's fascinating. So I think being able to see it as like a sort of superpower is impressive and is, I think, how you should look at it. Cause it's pretty awesome. We're well over 2 hours.
Oh my
it or
gosh.
not. Anything else? I don't want to hold you hostage too long.
If someone wanted to reach out directly to the studio or to you
directly to the studio or me directly.
Okay.
I don't use Facebook anymore, but I am on Instagram. I think it's Emily Mariola, Flex Yoga Worcester, easy, message there, email there. Dee, my manager, is awesome, and we can set up appointments, things like that. I would also say, reaching out to Ian, like he's done all of it. Like, if
I'm open to talk about it.
Yeah, he's open to talk about it. There's a couple of parents I know that have kids, and Ian's been willing to, just say, hey, listen to this. Either of us. Ian's not on social media. Are you on any social media anymore?
If you want to talk to me, you can text my mother.
Social media is not good for ADHD people.
Yeah. I don't think social media is good for basically anybody.
But yeah, reach out to both of us, and sometimes just talking about it, just feeling heard. Like, your kid's not a bad kid,
right?
You're not a bad adult because you don't, do certain things. Is, I hope, helpful. I don't know. We'll see.
Go outside, get sunlight.
Yeah.
Be
Move.
happy.
You got to move.
Well, I really appreciate it. I know it's been a blessing to me. And like I said, it's something that, it's ADHD is one of those things that, everyone kind of hears about, and it's a phrase that people are familiar with, but obviously unless you've lived it, or imagine living close to somebody that's lived it, it's one of those things that you just don't quite understand. So I really appreciate opening that door into your lives and giving, your story. And I always get constant feedback from people, different pieces and different types of people when they hear things that they've always loved, just people sharing, being open and honest and sharing their stories. So I really thank you guys for coming.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
I'm
it.
proud of Ian. I really am. I couldn't be more proud, and I'm, it's been fun to watch him process all of this. So I'm glad he came on. I have a lot of respect for him, and of course love him dearly. It's been great. So I appreciate you letting us both share it.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember, check out the website chronic-curiosity.com to join us at the forum, have some fun, interaction, pick you up a comfy t-shirt, or if you just want to support the show and donate, all that is on the website as well. Thank you. Until next time.
See ya.